Coming up now, study and discussion questions for great books, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. What is the critical point of Huck's transformation in the novel? Why did Mark Twain stop working on Huckleberry Finn for 2 years? Analyze Twain's statement that the business of a humorist is the deriding of sham, the exposure of pretentious falsities, the laughing of stupid superstitions out of existence. How did he fulfill this in Huck Finn? Mark Twain gave America two of its most famous and enduring children. Tom Sawyer, the smart kid who got his buddies to whitewash a fence by calling it a privilege, and Tom's sidekick, Huckleberry Finn, a street kid who lived by his wits and still lives as a kind of American folk hero. Twain called Tom Sawyer simply a hymn to boyhood. Huckleberry Finn was a different kind of song.
It shows how this kid, who was brought up in a very bigoted part of the country before slavery ended, who ingested all of that, and yet is able to transcend it through knowing one black guy.
It is both satire and adventure story. It is a century-old comic novel about growing up, about freedom and conscience, and a history that still hurts. Many consider it the greatest book ever made in America.
The angel of death come to take me away. Well, we'll see about that, won't we? The angel of death.
No, it's me, Huck. Huck, it's me, it's Huck.
Huck is the son of the town drunkard, long absent, who returns when he hears Huck has found some money. Jim Finn, Pap, is an outcast, full of hate for blacks, for society, and for civilization itself. To get his hands on Huck's money, Pap takes the boy away from his guardian, the widow Douglas and Miss Watson. At first, in spite of beatings and threats, Huck is glad to be free, as any boy would, of the nagging ladies who try to civilize him.
He's kind of lazy and jolly, laying off comfortable all day.
But then Pap locks them in their remote cabin. Huck escapes while his Pap is away by faking his own murder. Then he slips across the river in a canoe he has found to a place called Jackson Island. Meanwhile, Jim has overheard Miss Watson's plan to sell him to a plantation further south, away from his family and to a much harsher life. To sell him literally down the river. The phrase comes from this practice in the days of slavery. Huck finds Jim, promises not to tell on him, and the two fugitives decide to join forces. They find an abandoned old raft, and the adventure begins, told in the dialect of the Mississippi Valley before the Civil War. The novel was published in 1885, but the setting is 40 years earlier. Huck is the product of a slaveholding society, and he speaks the language of that society.
It's really a lot more than only language. Twain managed to understand the psychology of this child.
Mark Twain was born here in Florida, Missouri in the year 1835. Missouri was a slave state then.
No one arraigned it in my hearing. The local papers said nothing against it. The local pulpit taught us that God approved it, that it was a holy thing, and that the doubter need only look in the Bible if he wished to settle his mind. and the texts were read aloud to us to make the matter sure.
One of his uncle's slaves would, in a sense, stay with the writer all his life.
Uncle Daniel, I vividly remember seeing a dozen black men and women chained to one another once, lying in a group on the pavement, awaiting shipment to the southern slave market. Those were the saddest faces I have ever seen.
Whatever the particulars, Twain's early years would produce a writer scarred by feelings of guilt and given to bouts of severe depression, images of death, and manic periods he would describe as cyclones of humor. Twain wove brightness and darkness together in Huckleberry Finn, reliving in a way his own boyhood.
It was kind of solemn, drifting down the big, still river, laying on our backs, looking up at the stars, and we didn't ever feel like talking aloud, and it weren't often that we laughed, only a little kind of low chuckle. We had mighty good weather, as a general thing, and nothing ever happened to us at all, that night, nor the next, nor the next.
But things are about to happen. The education of Huckleberry Finn is about to start.
They are floating down the river by night and hiding in the willows by day, bound for Cairo.
Huckleberry Finn is a novel that goes right down the Mississippi River. The Mississippi symbolizes America, it symbolizes the frontier, but it also symbolizes the heartland of America. It's a journey about a young man coming into adult knowledge. And it's an adventure that's also about large moral issues. It's about the question of freedom and slavery. Huck, after all, is helping a slave to escape, which is illegal in America at that time.
We judged that 3 nights more would fetch us to Cairo, at the bottom of Illinois, where the Ohio River comes in. And that was what we was after. We would sell the raft and get on a steamboat and go way up to Ohio, amongst the free states, and then be out of trouble.
They are comrades, bound together by the current of the river and a shared goal. A friendship begins to grow, and so does Huck's guilty conscience. He is, after all, helping to steal Miss Watson's property. On a pretext, Huck sets out to turn Jim in, but friendship now has too strong a hold on him, and he discovers he just cannot do it. Huck returns to the raft, feeling guiltier than ever.
Then I thought a minute and says to myself, hold on. Suppose you'd have done right and give Jim up. Would you have felt better than what you do now? No, says I. I'd feel bad. I'd feel just the same way I do now. Well then, says I, what's the use you learning to do right when it's troublesome to do right and ain't no trouble to do wrong, and the wages is just the same? I was stuck. I couldn't answer that.
But we are attributing to Huck a conscience and are making Huck a good boy all the time. When he says he's a bad boy, he thinks he's bad, we think he's good. And we think he's good when he thinks he's bad. Now that's the dynamics of the inversion, what I call the inversion of humor in that book.
The critical point of Huck's transformation, and some think the heart of the book, is Huck's apology. Huck in the canoe, Jim on the raft, separated as the fog rises from the river. They are separated all night.
This way, Huck! Over here! Bob! Bob! Over here!
In the morning, Huck finds Jim asleep and decides to play a trick on him.
As if I've been gone away?
Huck Finn, look me in my eye, boy. Ain't you been gone away?
What in dad blame nation do you mean? I ain't been gone nowheres. Where would I go?
Well, wasn't it you that took the canoe and tied us to that towhead?
What towhead? I ain't seen no towhead.
When I got all tired and wore out last night from work and calling for you, well, I went to sleep. Because my heart was broke that you were lost, and I didn't care no more about this raft. All you was thinking about was how you could make a fool out of old Jim with a lie.
Jim teaches Huck about friendship. Their relationship becomes a serious thing when Huck realizes that Jim is a person with feelings and he can't just play any trick that amuses himself on Jim and not worry about it. It's a movement into maturity that Jim forces upon Huck by forcing Huck to acknowledge his humanity.
I didn't do him no more mean tricks, and I wouldn't have done that one if I'd have known it would make him feel that way.
Their friendship emerges from the fog, and so does confirmation of their fears. They can read that in the water.
When it was daylight, here was the clear Ohio water in short, sure enough. And outside was the old regular muddy. So it was all up with Cairo.
The heedless Mississippi had swept them past the gate to freedom. Freedom would be a lot harder to come by, perhaps even impossible.
You can't have freedom in a way, a deep concept of freedom, unless you have an idea of slavery and helplessness. That's when you have a larger vision of freedom, when you really feel the forces of determinism all around you, and you can really feel them on a river, a current that's bearing you south into slavery. That's the irony of that book. It's a deep one, too, that they're going deeper and deeper into slavery.
At that point, Sam Clemens has a different novel on his hands. He's had a white person apologize to a black person, doesn't know what to do, so he brings that steamboat up the Mississippi River, runs over the raft.
He's going to hit us, Huck!
Huck dives deep to escape being hit by the paddle wheel, and when he surfaces, Jim and the raft are gone. And so is the author. Saying his well of inspiration had run dry, Twain put the manuscript down and did not pick it up again for 2 years. After traveling, performing, and working on other books, Twain's well fills up again. He returns to Huckleberry Finn. When he does, the novel takes on a sharper edge and a darker tone.
Push the door open. Just squeeze in.
Why, he ain't a Shepherdson. Ain't no trace of Shepherdson about him.
The river has carried Huck into the heart of the American frontier and a savage satire of the national character. He finds refuge with a family named Grangerford, who are locked in a blood feud with the Shepherdsons. Later, Huck watches in horror as his new friend, Buck Grangerford, is killed.
Up to that point, it's been kind of a frolic, just a joyful trip down the river with some minor adventures. And once it resumes, it becomes a journey into the dark sides of American civilization, which sometimes have a very silly face, but as we go beneath the surface of them, we find a kind of moral rottenness along that journey. So Twain was able to capture an awful lot of American culture by using the voice of this semi-literate preteen boy.
Jim has gone into hiding among some local slaves who tell him Huck's whereabouts and recover the battered raft. Jim and Huck are reunited just in time to escape the feuding and the killing. They run for the raft. But absurdity and lunacy of another sort are right behind.
Help us, boy! Them dumps behind us, we've done nothing.
Yeah, now they're chasing us for it.
Come on, Jim, there ain't no time to sleep.
Come on.
The newcomers are two thieving con men who make outlandish claims to be an exiled duke and the French Dauphin. The king and the duke become Huck's guides to the underside of life, offering him and us the con man's view of people and society. These comic rascals help Twain perform what is for him the very serious business of the humorist.
The deriding of shams, the exposure of pretentious falsities, the laughing of stupid superstitions out of existence. And whoso is by instinct engaged in this sort of warfare is the natural enemy of royalties, nobilities, privileges, and all kindred swindles, and the natural friend of human rights and human liberty.
The King and the Duke reveal a harsh reality beneath the comic surface as they show the evil in their natures.
Me and my partner found this darky hiding out in some cottonwoods about 20 miles north of here. We're looking to sell out our share of the whole reward for a portion of it. Ready cash right now.
Most readers today probably wash their hands of the King and the Duke after they have sold Jim. An act which transforms the pair from fascinating characters to icons of evil. But they are more than mere symbols of slavery.
These are the problems of these great issues. That's the greatest issue in our whole history, is the issue of slavery, because it took a huge war to stop it. But the more that you reduce everything to that as an index, then you begin to reduce people's humanity too, whether you like it or not.
The royal pair finally do get their comeuppance, caught by one group of their victims. Their fate brings out Huck's compassion.
I see they had the King and the Duke astraddle of a rail. That is, I knowed it was the King and the Duke, though they was all over tar and feathers, and didn't look like nothing in the world that was human. Well, it made me sick to see it, and I was sorry for them poor pitiful rascals. It seemed like I couldn't ever feel any hardness against them any more in the world. It was a dreadful thing to see. Human beings can be awful cruel to one another.
Meanwhile, however, Huck has his own problems. He has learned where Jim is being kept, and his deformed conscience is at him again, warning him of hell fire if he does not right Miss Watson. It is here that the story leaves the grip of the river and continues on shore. Sally Phelps, it turns out, is expecting Tom Sawyer, who happens to be a nephew she has not seen for some time. Huck takes the cue and impersonates Tom, inventing a reason for being late, a steamboat explosion. And the irony is scalpel sharp. Tom Sawyer, the reader of romance novels, re-enters the story, and he makes a great romantic game out of helping to free Jim. The attempt fails. Tom gets a bullet in the leg for his troubles. Jim is nearly lynched. It is then that Tom reveals his secret. Miss Watson, repenting on her deathbed, had set Jim free in her will. Jim has been legally free for weeks. Something strange has happened. Jim's quest for freedom has become something of a joke, a plaything of adolescent boys. The reader now sees Tom Sawyer in a very different light. The endearingly clever young scamp has been toying with another man's life.
He gets disapproved forevermore. So Tom really gets beaten out in that book, and nobody ever likes Tom after that.
But Huck, too, seems to backslide a bit, less concerned with Jim, more concerned with continuing his own adventure. The idea of freeing a free man had a special resonance at the time Twain was writing the novel, the early 1880s. The country had fought a brutal civil war to rid itself of slavery, but it was now weary of the issue, and it turned its attention to opening the West and making money.
So I think the conclusion of this novel is actually an honest and truthful one, and it represents painful realities that a lot of Americans still are not willing to address honestly. Racial subordination is still a reality of American life. And the 1880s was a time when we were moving backwards. The hopes for empowering black people, for integrating black people into American life as full-fledged citizens, were overthrown with the collapse of Reconstruction.
Such is the human race. Often it does seem such a pity that Noah and his party did not miss the boat.
The one thing about reading this book is there is a white kid, Huck Finn, and a black guy named Jim who are better and more inventive and more resourceful and win out through more adventures than all the dumb, stupid, almost psychopathic whites in the book.
And it's a wonderful novel of what you could call male bonding. There's this reciprocal relationship or mutual relationship between the man of color and the white person helping each other. This is a basic national need to tell this story, to tell this myth again and again, whether it's Miami Vice or Crockett and Tubbs. Any number of times we have a mythic need to resolve the problems that come from slavery.
Huckleberry Finn is a profoundly unsettling book, and I think that's the secret of its endurance and, let's say, immortality. I think anyone who responds to Huckleberry Finn's own conflicts of conscience at heart will never again be able to accept as moral absolutes the conventional wisdom of a particular time and place. It forces us to question things. It is the work of an authentic genius.
Since its 1885 publication, Huckleberry Finn has seen 157 American editions, 53 Russian editions, 63 editions in the United Kingdom, 36 in Swedish, and 32 in Spanish. Altogether, the book has been issued in more than 850 different editions and 65 languages. Ernest Hemingway wrote, "All American literature comes from one book by Mark Twain called Huckleberry Finn. American writing comes from that. There was nothing before, there has been nothing as good since."
And so there ain't nothing more to write about, and I'm rotten glad of it. Because if I'd have known what a trouble it was to make a book, I wouldn't have tackled it, and I ain't gone to no more. But I reckon I got a light out for the territory ahead of the rest, because Aunt Sally, she's gonna adopt me and civilize me, and I can't stand it. I've been there before.
The end. Yours truly, Huck Finn.
Keep watching. Answers to discussion questions, activities, and resources for the adventures of Huckleberry Finn are up next on Assignment Discovery. Coming up now, answers to the questions for Great Books, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. The critical point of Huck's transformation is his apology to Jim, at which point Huck finally acknowledges Jim's humanity and the significance of their friendship. Twain stopped working on Huckleberry Finn for 2 years because he said his well of inspiration had run dry. Try this activity with your class. Have each student find a 1990s television program, movie, or novel that parallels Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. The student should then explain the parallels in an oral presentation. To learn more, members of the American Association of School Librarians and Assignment Discovery suggest Understanding the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Claudia D. Johnson. Log on to school.discovery.com for curriculum materials and resources to complement Great Books, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn.